Your career may not have always been perfect. You've made mistakes, you've learned lessons. There are different things that you've done, and the easiest way to communicate that is through storytelling. And I think it really humanizes your career and technical experience in a way that might be easier for a mentee to understand who just hasn't had as much experience, and to sort of bring you closer together, right? You're not someone who's been perfect and always been at the top of your game. You've been where they are, where you've been working hard to improve yourself or improve your agency.
When you tell a story, the person who's listening to you sort of automatically, their brain is triggered to put themselves in the story. So I might be telling a story about me. The person I'm talking to is already imagining what they would do if they were in that place. And so it almost creates like a safe space for them to imagine how they would handle that situation themselves inside the narrative. And I really love also that stories can help people figure out how to overcome obstacles or navigate career transitions.
Hello, and welcome to the final episode of our Storytelling Miniseries. I'm Sylvia, staff writer at GovCIO Media and Research. Have you ever been in a meeting and your colleagues around you start to sound like this?
So I went to York on the watch today.
Oh?
Yeah, that doll's a rainbow on her face. Can't believe that Maury album, John. Did you stop by the Love Black Call?
Yeah, I come by the next train.
What you just heard was from a short film called Squirrel. Its dialogue is based on what English sounds like to non-English speakers, and sometimes that's how it can feel in a meeting. Our guests in this episode, Sarah Moffatt, Cate Berard, and Lauren Craig, were all in those meetings too. Storytelling offered a way for them to cut through the jargon and reach a mutual level of understanding. It also offered a way for them to ask questions in an environment they felt comfortable in.
Some of the things that I practiced was like major active listening, like paying attention to try to hear stories within the stories, within what was happening. But the other thing was I had to work up the nerve to say, I don't understand what you just told me. Can you please explain it to me? But the other thing I did that I think set me apart on that particular contract and that really propelled my career was I went individually to the key players on that team and just said, like, can you explain to me who you are, what your job is? And I asked them to tell me how they got there. Oh, well, I went to Carnegie Mellon and I got my degree in this. And they told me their story of how they got to where they were. And I started to be able to put together pieces. Oh, this person does this part, this person does this part, and that's how this thing comes together. So really, I took everybody's stories and helped form myself a story of like what in the world this GovCIO was, what we were doing, why I fit in, how I fit in. And I was able to then put myself into that story and figure out what my role was, what my character was within that particular contract.
You're trying to develop your career and you're in a meeting or you're in a briefing with all these other people and you feel like, gosh, I'm afraid to even talk because I think I'm picking up on, maybe, 20% of what everybody's saying. In AI, because you use the AI, right? If you think about it, a use case is actually a story, right? I mean, we don't need to use these technical jargons about, well, we need to have a use case. Well, a use case is, tell me the story about how a claim is processed, right? Tell me a story about how a citizen can interact with the FDA website. Tell me a story about that. So again, I think we need to make it simple, right? And stories are not just a story about us. A story can be, tell me how a day in the life of, a claim, or a day in the life of a call center person, or a day in the life of a citizen trying to interact with the IRS, right? I'm just giving you examples, but those are all stories. So I don't think we should think about stories as or folks should think about stories as just something about themselves, but stories interact with us in our daily lives. And it's a way, in my opinion, or a strategy, in my opinion, to kind of simplify and translate some of the tech talk into kind of real, everyday, almost kindergarten level talk.
I also think that when you're the person explaining, it's very important to be cognizant of not falling into your own world and using acronyms. So I work with two completely different groups of people, which is environmental policy folks and IT folks. and they have their completely different list of acronyms that they use. It's important to try and keep your audience in mind. And I try to assume that people do not know any of the acronyms. And so either use a different word or tell them explicitly what it is. And I'll say from my side, also on listening, especially in meetings with new people, I will jot down all of the acronyms I don't know and then look them up so that I know for the next meeting. And that's something easy enough to do when you come across new acronyms, which happens all the time in the government.
Telling your own story means listening to the stories of others, but perhaps more importantly, it means asking questions. Asking questions is a way to show you're actively listening, and a good mentorship allows you both to learn from the stories you tell one another.
This is going to sound kind of odd, but I actually have mentors that are 2 generations younger than I am. So I reach for mentors to help me, I don't want to say stay hip, but really to help me understand how they are seeing the world today, how they're seeing their work environment today. And it gives me an opportunity just to listen and just to ask questions and, get some real honest, candid feedback. So especially when around leadership styles, around management styles, around their work ethic. So I love these are some of the meetings that I don't reschedule, believe it or not, are the ones on my calendar where I try and make sure I make the time for those my younger mentors for me.
Something I learned recently that I love is to ask, can you tell me what you've tried so far? Or can you tell me what solutions you've tried so far? And that gets people talking about how they've been thinking about the problem. And then it gives you a chance to hear. So you're not saying, did you try this? And they're like, yeah, I did. Did you try this? Yeah, I did. So I think, having that curiosity and asking those open-ended questions is really important. And that will help get you to a place where you're really understanding. I also think it's, I like reframing. Something else I've learned is instead of saying like what I heard, I like to say what you told me is X, Y, and Z. Like, did I get that right? So I think those kinds of questions, those being curious and asking for more information, the right information, I think really does help to breed greater understanding and coming together.
Relationships are a balance of talking and listening. But how do you know when you've shared too much? For some, you might not be oversharing. On average, we spend 1/3 of our lives at work, and in our last episode, we discussed about the illusion of a work-life balance. Sarah, Cate, and Lauren each talked about how oversharing can help people get closer and create an overall supportive workplace environment.
I do purposefully share parts of my personal life, and I do that with executives above me. I do that with my team below me because it humanizes me. I do that when I network. I do that very intentionally on LinkedIn. And I actually have like a whole personal branding book that I have developed over my career on like how to do this on LinkedIn very intentionally. There are very specific ways that you can take a professional success and tie your personal life to it, because we are a whole person. So I think particularly as women, I think it's really important to kind of like claim our identity of who we are as a full person.
There is something that I might, and the example I'll give is, let's say that I was out sick and therefore I haven't responded to some emails. So to my immediate team, I know them well enough to be like, yeah, we all had strep and I didn't get any sleep and I am really behind. But that's not necessarily something that I need to share with like our field office or our deputy secretary. So then the next level is with people that I work with frequently. I was out of the office sick. I'm trying to catch up. Here's what I'm doing. And then there's a level of I don't really know you. We're having a professional discussion. I just haven't been available, right? So like, where are those cutoff points in a particular story and who are the groups of people for which you have that comfort? Like, who are the people you can really be honest with and kind of laugh about it and even build that rapport? And then I don't want to say more professional, but just a more limited set of information so that you don't overshare, but still conveys what you need to convey. In this case, I haven't been able to respond to you, right? But not everyone needs to know that everyone in my family had strep, right? So I think it's framing whatever it is that you're trying to communicate to your audience and knowing who sits within that audience, and so that you can easily pick, like, okay, well, this is what I should say because this is my current relationship with whoever this person is.
I also think it's important when you're setting a tone to make yourself a little bit vulnerable, but then also invite people to also participate. So, it can help that way with trying to establish a culture or a community feeling that, we don't have to be all about work, and that it's okay to, share things that might be outside of work that mean something to you, because at the end of the day, we are one community, and, you spend more waking hours with these people, than you do doing any, during the whole hours of the week, right? So it's appropriate, I think, sometimes to share. And I like to kind of create that culture of, hey, we're celebrating babies being born, we're celebrating, or we're mourning something that happens. When it comes to sharing or self-promoting, I do not think people need to do self-promoting amongst their teams or even managing up. And here's why. There's always a place for self-promoting when you're doing an executive interview, right? And job application, have an opportunity to be, in an elevator with the secretary, deputy secretary about here's what I do, in an introduction, all makes sense. But when you're talking about your projects, your programs, it's all about team. It's not about you, right? It's not about you led this or you did the X, Y, and Z or whatever. It's all about the team that I worked on. We had these outcomes. It's the team. And then what will come back to you really is if you're the one that actually led that team and you're saying it in a big setting, your team is going to talk up and say, well, wait a second, you actually are the one that led it. And it's thanks to you, because that's the best promotion anybody can get. And you bring that on by never taking it yourself and being a self-promoter and really promoting everybody on the team.
So you've done it. You've been to the networking events, you've gone to the office events in person, and you've met some great people for your network. But how do you maintain those relationships?
What I have to do is schedule it. I have to say, in the next month, and I usually have to push it out like 4 to 6 weeks. Can we get together for a half hour for coffee over Zoom or in person if that happens to work, so that we can talk? These are the people whose I really like to maintain those relationships. So actively making sure that I'm trying to put time in the calendar to touch base with them. Or so I'm 100% remote. I'm in Denver, Colorado, but whenever I go to DC, there's like the list of people where I say, hey, which morning are you free for us to get coffee, or can you go out for dinner or a drink, so that we can just actually talk. And the one thing I will say about those conversations is I try to, particularly if you're building work relationships, I try to bring two things to that conversation. One is to ask them about something they were really excited about with regards to work the last time we talked, and hear like how that went, where they are, whether it went well or not well, and just give them an opportunity to share their successes on something work, and then try to remember something in their personal life that they might want to talk about, like, you got a new kitten, tell me about how the new kitten is doing, or whatever the case may be. And that helps me going into like a big unknown half hour coffee, to say, I know this person and we do have a good relationship and we do have things to talk about.
It's kind of like a garden, and you really need to cultivate them. And there are different plants that require different sunlight, different attention, different water, different nutrients. And so how you attend to those relationships really depends on what kind of relationship it is and how you want to maintain it. So there might be some that you want, there's someone much more senior than you, and you want them to take a vested interest in you. How you engage and interact with that person is going to be much different than a peer that you met at a conference that you want to stay in touch with for a partnership later. Think about the different kinds of flowers in your relationship and your network garden, and think about how you want them to grow and what each one might need. to Cate's point earlier, to Lauren's point earlier too, it is a strategy. You have to be intentional about it. You have to do it on purpose. So I remember when I was really growing my network, I set 30 minutes on my calendar every day to get on LinkedIn, whether it was commenting on somebody's post, reposting something else with my own commentary, reaching out to someone. It was very intentional. And so again, you're cultivating a garden. So what does that garden need? And it's not going to be the same for all people, all times, for all reasons.
Tending to your garden of networks will also require you to tend to yourself. Sarah, Cate, and Lauren agreed that growing relationships will mean taking an inward reflection period. Learning to be vulnerable, focusing on coming from a place of empathy, and overall investing in your emotional intelligence invites trust and depth into your relationships.
At the end of the day, no matter what your technical expertise is or where you are in the food chain or anything, everyone is human. And also, everyone is a different human. So one of the things that I try to do is solicit advice from people who are different from me. So people who are neurodiverse, people who are older, people who are younger, people who are, high up in our organization, interns, and say, this is something that I'm going through, or this is something that's happening at work. How do you see that? Like, what would you do? And I think getting the perspective of someone who's very different from me is incredibly helpful. And I think that helps build my emotional intelligence, recognizing that, yes, we can connect as humans, but maybe we connect differently or respond differently. And maybe that's something that you need to consider when you're in a particular situation. And that's, again, an intentional thing where you have to go and seek out someone who might have a differing opinion, ask them for it, but it's worth it, right? Because that continues to build my understanding of how neurodiverse people work, how people who are near retirement are thinking, like how interns are thinking, so that I can better interact with those people in all kinds of different situations, both inside and outside of work.
I think one of the most important things for me about emotional intelligence is self-awareness. And that's something I don't think that can be taught. I think that is something you must desire and you must actively seek after. And one of the things that I have tried to practice in my life is I call it being teachable. I want to have like a teachable heart. And I try to let people know that about me. So I have what I call a round table, right? Like King Arthur had the round table. I have a round table, and I have strategically requested, either formally or informally, people to sit around that round table. And the people that sit at that round table know my desire is to be teachable, to have that self-awareness. And so Lauren, for example, is at my round table. If Lauren sees me interact in a way that is not benefiting my career, she's going to come and tell me. That's going to bring self-awareness if I let it, if I receive it, and if I ingest it, and if I decide to do something with it. So, a tip that I have for people is always establish a round table and be willing to accept information. Listen, there's going to be some people in your life who are going to give you information that's not for you. You don't have to keep it. But if these are people that you trust and love and respect and admire, and they give you information, you better damn well do something with it if you want to have self-awareness and if you want to grow your emotional intelligence.
Thank you all so much for listening to our Storytelling Miniseries. Throughout these 4 episodes, our guests shared insights on how to tailor your narrative to your audience, how to build long-lasting relationships, and how to turn adversary into opportunities. Do you like what you heard so far? Be sure to rate and review us on the podcast platform of your choice. It will help us deliver the content that matters most to you. For GovCIO Media and Research, I'm Sylvia Oakland.